And if you keep looking at me with those wide, terrified eyes, I might find it impossible to keep my hands or my tongue off of you. I can hear your heart racing, little human. Are you sure you want to know what else a demon can do with his mouth? One's entire face turned a deep, bright crimson. She felt like her brain had just short circuited. She stumbled back, hitting the dresser, her mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. The playful tension that had filled the room only moments ago evaporated, replaced by a silence so heavy it felt like lead in wine's lungs. The air grew frigid, and the shadows on the wall stopped dancing, freezing into jagged, sharp shapes. Wine looked at him, her eyes searching his handsome porcelain like face. For a second, the predatory hunger in his gaze flickered, revealing a hollow, ancient ache. How did it happen? You were not always this. You were human once, were not you? How did you become a demon? Jungkook's expression didn't soften, instead, it turned into a mask of cold, sharpened glass. He leaned back, his eyes fixated on a point in the distance, as if he were seeing a ghost from a century ago. Human, yes, I was a man who believed in things like loyalty and hard work. I was an architect building empires for a man who didn't deserve to stand in my shadow. One of them, a man with a silver tongue and a heart made of rotting meat, invited me to dinner to celebrate our finished project. His voice dropped an octave, turning into a low, guttural rasp that made the floorboards vibrate. He didn't bring a toast, he brought a blade. He had me bound to a chair in the cellar of his mansion. He didn't just want me dead, he wanted to watch the light go out of my eyes because I knew too much about his corruption. He drove a rustle spike through my chest, laughing while I choked on my own blood. He buried me beneath the very foundation of the building I designed. Wine felt a cold sweat break out across her skin. The detail was too vivid, the malice too real. That's horrible. Who could do something so monstrous? Jungkook slowly turned his head toward her. A slow, terrifyingly beautiful smile spread across his lips, but it didn't reach his crimson eyes. A rich man, a man with a prestigious family name, a man who looked exactly like you. Wine. Does the name Minho ring a bell? Your perfect older brother. Wine's heart stopped. The word seemed to tilt on its axis. Her brother, the one who paid for her first year of medical school, the one she looked up to. No, that's impossible. My brother, he's a businessman. He couldn't. He did, and he enjoyed every second of it. I spent decades in the blackness, my soul curdling into hate until the earth itself spat me back out as a nightmare. He stood up, his height suddenly looming over her, casting a shadow that swallowed her whole. He stepped closer, his presence so suffocating she couldn't move. Weird. The apartment, Mina's uncle, the low rent, was that all a coincidence? Jungkook let out a sound that started as a chuckle and spiraled into a loud laugh that echoed off the walls like a company of breaking glass. He gripped her chin, his fingers cold as a tombstone, forcing her to look at the madness swirling in his eyes. Do you really think fate brought you here? Do you think the universe is that kind? No, wine, it was me. I have been watching your family for years. I whispered in your friend's ear. I broke those cups at your job. I made sure your landlord lost his temper. I dragged you here step by step into my trap. He leaned down, his breath like a winter wind against her ear. I didn't want just any soul. I wanted his bloodline. I wanted the thing he loves most in this world so I could tear it apart slowly. You are not my roommate, Wine, you are my revenge. He threw his head back and laughed again, a wild jack sound of pure insanity that made Wine realize with a sickening joy she wasn't just living with a demon, she was being haunted by a ghost her own family had created. The echo of Jungkook's maniacal laughter slowly died down, leaving a silence so heavy it felt like it was crushing the air out of Wine's lungs. She stared at him, her vision blurring as hot tears of frustration and terror pooled in her eyes. Her legs finally gave out and she sank to the floor, her medical textbooks scattered around her like fallen leaves. But my brother, you are doing all of this because of him? Jungkook tilted his head, his crimson eyes glowing with the sickening satisfaction. He looked down at her like she was a broken toy. The blood of the sinner flows in your veins, Wine. That is enough for me. No, you don't understand. He's not even my real brother. He's my step brother. And if you think he loves me, you are wrong. He hates me more than you do. The demonic smirk on Jungkook's face flickered for a split second. He glided closer, the coldness radiating from his body, making Wine shiver violently. Explain yourself and choose your words carefully. Little human, my patience is as thin as your pulse. He is the reason I'm here. After my mother died, he took everything, the house, the money, everything. He kicked me out of my own home and told me never to come back. I don't even know where he is. I have been working three jobs and studying until I collapsed just to survive because he left me with nothing. She let out a broken jagged sob, covering her face with her hands. The weight of her exhaustion, her poverty, and now this supernatural nightmare finally broke her spirit. You want to hurt him? Join the club. But using me for revenge is pointless. To him, I'm just trash, he threw away. If you kill me, he won't cry, he will probably laugh. Chunguk froze, the shadows that had been lashing out around the room suddenly stilled. He lowered himself, hovering just inches above the floor so he was at eye level with her. He reached out, his long, cold fingers gripping her chin and forcing her to look at him. He searched her eyes, his power diving deep into her mind to see if she was lying. He didn't see the trickery of a murderer. He saw memories of a cold night on a porch, a suitcase being thrown down the stairs, and a man with a cruel smile, the same man who had killed him, slamming the door in Wine's crying face. So, the wolf didn't just kill me, he devoured his own pack too. His voice was no longer louder maniacal, it was low, dangerous, and carried a trace of something that almost sounded like curiosity. I am just a girl trying to pass my exam so I can have a life. I didn't ask for any of this. I didn't ask for a brother who is a murderer, and I didn't ask for a demon roommate who wants to eat my soul. Jungkook let go of her chin, but he didn't move away. He stayed close, his scent of rain and dark wood filling her senses. The crimson in his eyes faded back to a deep, swirling black. It seems my revenge has a flaw. I brought you here to make him suffer. But how can I hurt a man through a sister he already discarded? He stood up, looking down at her crumpled form on the floor. A dark, twisted thought seemed to cross his mind. He didn't look angry anymore, he looked intrigued. If he took everything from you, Wine, wouldn't you like to see him crawl? Wouldn't you like to see the man who ruined both of our lips scream for mercy? Wine looked up, her breath catching in her throat. The fear was still there, but beneath it, a tiny spark of something dark and vengeful flickered. What are you saying? I was going to break you, but perhaps we should break him together instead. But tell me why, if I help you get your life back, what will you give me in return? Because I still haven't changed my mind about one thing. He leaned down again, his lips ghosting over her ears, sending a chill down her spine that wasn't just from the cold. You are still in my house and you still belong to me. The air in the room seemed to freeze, turning into a thick, suffocating blanket. Wine looked up at him, her heart hammering against her ribs. So hard it was painful. She was a medical student. She knew how the body reacted to fear, but this wasn't just adrenaline. This was something ancient, something primal. Every deal has a price, especially with someone like you. So tell me, if we do this, if you help me and I help you, what do you want from me? She expected him to ask for her soul or perhaps for her to commit some unspeakable act. She expected him to ask for the one thing she didn't have, money. Jungkook didn't answer immediately. He began to circle her, his movements as fluid and silent as a shadow. Each step he took left a faint frost like trail on the floorboards. He stopped behind her, leaning down, so his cold breath fanned against the back of her neck, sending a violent shiver down her spine. I have no use for money, I have no use for the petty things humans crave. He moved again, appearing right in front of her. He reached out, his long, pale fingers tracing the line of her collarbone, dipping just slightly beneath the edge of her oversized t shirt. His touch was like ice. Yet it left a trail on fire on her skin. Then what? My life? My soul? Jungkook leaned in, his face inches from hers. His eyes were no longer black, they were a deep, swirling vortex of crimson and shadows. Pulling her in, he looked at her with a hunger that made her knees feel weak, a hunger that wasn't about eating but about possessing. I want you. Wine breathed hitched. Her brain scrambled to process the words me. What do you mean? You want me like as a servant? As a snack? Jungkook let out a low, dark growl that vibrated in his chest. He grabbed her waist, pulling her flush against his cold, hard body. One hand came up to cup her cheek, his thumb dragging slowly, possessively over her bottom lip. I want all of you, your thoughts, your breath, your body, and every beat of that frantic little heart. I want you to be the only who welcomes me home and the one who fears my touch while secretly craving it. That's not a deal. That's a prison. Jungkook leaned down, his lips coasting over her so close she could taste the metallic tang of his power. Call it what you want, but imagine it wine. No more worrying about rent, no more managers scolding you. No more running from the man who destroyed your life. I will give you the word on a silver platter, but you will be mine to keep, mine to touch, mine to break, and mine to love in the darkest way possible. Wine felt her face heating up, a deep burning blush spreading from her chest to her ears. She was terrified, yes, but her heart was racing for a completely different reason now. The way he looked at her as if she were the only thing in the universe that mattered was intoxicating. So, little doctor, do we have a deal? Will you give yourself to the demon who wants to burn the world for you? Wine looked into his crimson eyes, the silence of the room ringing in her ears. She knew she should say no, she knew she should run. But as his hand tightened around her waist, she felt a dangerous, thrilling pull toward the darkness. The following week was a blur of shadows and silence. Every night, Wine felt Jungkook's presence watching her, a constant weight in the dark room. She realized she couldn't go back to her normal life, not with the memory of his cold touch and the knowledge of her brother's crimes. Finally, standing in the center of the room, she whispered the word that changed everything. Yes, I will do it. I'm yours. In an instant, the air had swirled and Jungkook appeared before her, his smile beautiful and terrifying. He had spent the next few days tracking the scent of the man who had murdered him. It didn't take long. Minho wasn't hiding, he was thriving. He was now the CEO of a massive tech corporation living in a world of glass, steel, and stolen money. The day of the confrontation arrived. Wine stood in front of the towering glass skyscraper, her heart hammering. Jungkook was invisible to the world, but she could feel his cold hand resting possessively on the small of her back. Go in, little doctor, show him the ghost he tried to bury. Wine walked past the secretaries, her face a mask of determination. She pushed open the heavy oak doors of the top floor office. Minho was sitting behind a desk that probably cost more than her tuition, looking at some papers. When he looked up and saw her, his face didn't show love, it showed pure ugly annoyance. Why? How did you get past security? I told you never to show your face to me again. You are a stain on this family name. He stood up, walking toward her with an arrogant, slow stride. He looked rich and polished, but his eyes were as cold as a snake's. I'm not here for money, Mino. I'm here for the truth. I know what you did to the man who built your empire. Minho's expression shifted for a second. A flash of fear crossed his face, but it was quickly replaced by a disgusting, predatory smirk. He stopped right in front of her, leaning down to her height. You have grown up, little sister. You have become quite the woman. While living in the gutter, maybe I was too harsh when I kicked you out. He raised his hand, his fingers reaching out to stroke her cheek in a way that made Wine's skin crawl with revulsion. It was a gesture of power and disrespect. Come here, let me see how much you have. Suddenly, Minho's hand stopped midair. He gasped, his muscles locking up. He tried to pull back, but he was frozen as if he had been turned to stone. The temperature in the luxury office plummeted. The glass walls began to crack and the lights flickered and died. A dark shimmering mist began to swirl behind Vine. From the shadows, Jungkook stepped out. He was no longer hiding his power. His eyes were a burning, hellish red, and his aura was so heavy it made the air feel like liquid lead. Minho's eyes widened until they looked like they would pop out of his head. His face turned a ghostly, sickly white. His jaw trembled as he choked out a single word. You? No, you're dead. I buried you. You're rotten dust. Chungkook leaned over Vine's shoulder, his hand sliding around her waist to pull her back against his chest. He looked at Minho with a smile that promised a slow, agonizing end. Yes, me, did you think? A little bit of dirt and a rusted spike could keep me down, Minho. You stole my life and you stole hers, but today the debt is due. Jungkook's grip on Wine tightened and he whispered something to her that only she could hear. Watch closely, Wine. This is the part where the wolf realizes he is just a lamb in front of a cot. The atmosphere in the CEO's office turned into a symphony of horror. Jungkook didn't even touch Minho. With his hands, he simply looked at the massive floor to ceiling glass windows that overlooked the city. With a flick of his fingers, the reinforced glass didn't just break, it exploded outward as if struck by a silent wrecking ball. Minho screamed, his body being dragged toward the ledge by an invisible violent wind. He clawed at the expensive carpet, his fingernails tearing, but the shadows were pulling him toward the abyss. You loved looking down on people from this height, didn't you? Let's see how you feel when the ground comes up to meet you. With a final guttural cry, Minho was flung into the night air. The world below it looked like a tragic accident, the structural failure of a glass pane, a CEO lost to a freak gust of wind. But Wine saw the truth. She saw the way the shadows pushed him and the way his eyes went dark with agony before he disappeared into the void. Hours later, the apartment was silent. The news was already buzzing with the accidental death of the young CEO, but inside room 404, time seemed to stand still. Wine sat on the edge of her bed, her hands trembling so violently she had to tuck them under her thighs. The room felt unnaturally cold. A shadow flickered in the corner, and then Jungkook was there, standing tall and present as if he hadn't just ended a man's life. You literally killed him. There was no trial, no justice. He's just gone. You actually did it. Justice is a human concept, Vine. I prefer retribution. He took my breath away in a dark cellar. I took his in the open sky. We are even now. He stepped closer, his boots clicking softly on the floorboards. The crimson glow in his eyes hadn't fully faded. It simmered like dying embers. Wine looked up at him, her heart doing a strange dance of terror and a dark, twisted sense of relief. So, you got your revenge. You're free now, right? You can go back to wherever demons go. Jungkook let out a low, vibrating chuckle that seemed to hum through the very walls of the room. He reached out, his hand sliding into her hair, his cold fingers brushing against her scalp. Free? No. Little doctor, I told you before I have no use for freedom when I have something much more precious in my sight. He leaned down, his face inches from hers. The scent of sandalwood and ozone was overwhelming. His gaze dropped to her lips, and his expression turned into something intensely possessive. One part of our business is finished, your brother is dead, and your debt is toward his paid. But the other part, the most important part, remains. I believe you gave me a yes a week ago. Once breath hissed, she felt like a bird trapped in a beautiful gilded cage. What you still want? I want you. I want to feel your heart stop every time I walk into the room. I want to be the reason you can't sleep at night and the only thing that protects you from the other monsters in the dark. He pulled her up from the bed, his arms wrapping around her waist like iron bands. He buried his face in the crook of her neck, inhaling deeply as if her very scent was an addiction. You are the blood of my enemy, but you are the soul of my obsession. You think you are going back to your little books and your little cafe? No, you belong to the dark now. You belong to me. Vine felt a tear escape her eye, but she didn't pull away. Instead, her hands instinctively gripped his shoulders. She was terrified of him, yes, but in his cold, cruel world, he was the only thing that had ever truly fought for her. What are you going to do to me? Jungkook pulled back just enough to look into her eyes, a dark, wicked smirk playing on his lips. Everything, I'm going to do everything I have dreamed of for 100 years. The weeks that followed Minho's accident were a blur of legal meetings and sudden wealth. As the only surviving relative, Wine inherited everything the mansion, the accounts, the legacy, but despite the luxury now at her fingertips, she didn't leave the old apartment. She couldn't because the shadows there had a heartbeat and that heartbeat had become her own. At first, her feelings were a messy knot of Stockholm syndrome and trauma, but slowly the knot began to unravel into something far more dangerous. Devotion, it started with the small things. Wine would be hunched over her medical textbooks at 3 a.m., her eyes burning with exhaustion, and she would feel a sudden unnatural warmth envelop her shoulders. A blanket smelling of cold rain and expensive wood would manifest out of thin air. One evening, Wine sat at her desk, her head resting on her arms, tears of frustration leaking onto her notes. I'm going to fail. I can't remember the cranial nerves. My brain is just mush. Suddenly, the chair next to her pulled back on its own. Jungkook materialized not as a terrifying shadow but in a human form so breathtakingly beautiful. It made her heart skip a beat. He leaned over her shoulder, his long fingers pointing to a diagram in her book. The olfactory nerve is the first. It's how you smell the fear on your classmates, little doctor. And the optic is the second. It's how I can see your soul, even when you try to hide it from me. Wine looked up, her breath hitching. He wasn't mocking her, his voice was low and strangely patient. For the next 4 hours, the most powerful demon in the underworld sat in a dusty apartment and quizzed a mortal girl on human anatomy. Why are you doing this? You are a demon. Shouldn't you be out? I don't know, causing a chaotic eclipse or something. The word is boring, Vine. The only thing in this miserable century that isn't predictable is the way you keep fighting. It's intoxicating. She realized then that he wasn't just her captor, he was the only person who had ever stayed. Her parents were gone, her brother was a monster, and her friends were fleeting, but Jungkook was constant. He was a dark sanctuary. A few nights later, Wine woke up from a nightmare about the brother. She was gasping for air, her skin clamming with sweat. Before she could even call out, she felt the bed sink. Cold, strong arms wrapped around her, pulling her back against a chest that didn't beat but felt like a solid marble. He can't hurt you in the dark. I own the dark, remember? Wine turned in his arms, her face buried in his silk shirt. She should have been terrified. She was laying in the arms of a murderer, a creature of pure malevolence. But as she inhaled his scent, she felt a wave of peace so profoundly terrified her. Jungkook, why do I feel safe with you? You are a monster. Jungkook tilted her chin up, his thumb stroking her jawline. His eyes were soft, a deep swirling obsidian that seemed to swallow all her fears. Because I am your monster, Wine. The world was cruel to you, so I became the thing the world is afraid of. I'm the wall between you and everything that wants to hurt you. Wine looked at his lips, her heart racing not from fear, but from a desperate, aching hunger. She realized she didn't want to leave. She didn't want the sun. She wanted the shadow. She leaned forward, her lips pushing against his, a silent surrender to the darkness. I think I'm losing my mind because I don't want you to ever let me go. Jungkook's grip tightened, his eyes flashing a brief crimson. He didn't just kiss her, he claimed her. His touch a brand that told the universe she was no longer part of the light. I told you why you're mine, and I have never been good at sharing my tears. The air in the mansion was no longer cold and scary, it was warm and filled with the scent of expensive roses and Jungkook's sandalwood. Wine had everything she ever wanted: money, a beautiful home, and a powerful protector who loved her with a terrifying intensity. But as a medical student, Wine couldn't ignore the signs. Her own body was feeling her. She stood in front of the bathroom mirror, her breath hitching, as she saw the dark vein like bruises spreading across her collarbone. She was pale, her eyes were sunken, and she felt a constant freezing ache in her bones. She coughed into a tissue, and her heart nearly stopped when she saw a splash of dark, almost black blood. Oh my god, Wine, you're a doctor. You know what this is. This isn't a virus, this is him. She walked back into the bedroom where Jungkook was standing by the window staring at the moon. He looked like a masterpiece, but to Wine, he now looked like a beautiful poison. Jungkook, we need to talk. And don't you dare read my mind. I want to say this out loud. Jungkook turned slowly the moment his eyes landed on her. The shadows in the room flickered with his sudden distress. He appeared in front of her in a second, his cold hands cupping her face. You're getting weaker. I can smell the road in your blood wine. Why is your heart beating so slowly? Because of you, Jungkook, I'm a human. You are a demon from the deepest part of hell. Your energy, your love is it's killing me. My body can't handle being near you. I'm literally wilting like a flower in a freezer. Jungkook's hands trembled. For the first time, the powerful, arrogant demon looked small. He looked like a boy who had finally found a treasure, only to realize he was crushing it just by holding it. No, I can fix this. I'll give you my blood. I'll find a spell. I'll burn the heavens until they give me a way to keep you. You can't, Jungkook. The more you touch me, the faster I die. Every kiss was sheer steals a day of my life. Look at me. I'm 21 years old and I look like I'm fading away. Jungkook let out a low, broken sound, a sob that didn't sound human. He fell to his knees, wrapping his arms around her waist, burying his face in her stomach. I waited 100 years for revenge, but I would wait 1,000 more just to have one more hour with you. Is this my real punishment? To finally love someone and be the cause of her death? There is only one way I live, isn't there? You have to leave, not just the room, not just the house. You have to go back to wherever you came from. You have to break the bond. Jungkook looked up, his eyes bleeding crimson red tears. The room began to shake as his power reacted to his grief. If I leave, you will forget me. This is the rule of the void. A mortal cannot remember a demon. Once the contract is broken, you will wake up tomorrow and you will think your brother died in an accident. You will think you moved here alone. You won't remember my name. You won't remember how I held you. Wine's heart shattered. She reached down, stroking his soft black hair, her own tears falling onto his cheeks. I would rather live and miss a shadow I can't remember than die in your arms and leave you alone forever. Please, Jungkook, if you love me, let me breathe again. Jungkook stood up, his face becoming a mask of cold, tragic stone. He leaned in, pressing his forehead against hers one last time. The fragrance of sandalwood filled her lungs. You were the only light I ever found in the dark wine. I will hate the universe for this until the stars go out. I love you, you scary, beautiful demon. Goodbye, my little doctor. He pressed a final icy kiss to her forehead. Suddenly, a blinding white light filled the room. Wine felt a sharp pain in her chest, like a string being snapped, and then nothing. The next morning, Wine woke up as the sun streamed through the windows of her luxury mansion. She stretched, feeling incredibly healthy and full of energy. She looked around the beautiful room with a confused smile. Wow, I must have been really tired. Why am I sleeping in my clothes? She got out of bed and walked to the window. She felt a strange, lingering sadness in her chest, like she had lost something important, but she couldn't remember what. She looked at a spot on the floor in front. That's weird. Why did I think there was a rug there? And why does the room smell like sandalwood? She shook her head, laughing at herself. Get it together, Wine. You are a CEO now. You have exams to pass. You are all alone in this big house. But for some reason, I feel like someone is watching over me. He walked out of the room, never seeing the shadow in the corner that lingered for just a second longer, a pair of dark eyes watching her with a love that she would never know existed. As the sun rose higher, casting a warm glow over the life, she no longer had to struggle. For Chungkook stood in the thinning shadows of the hallway, a silent sentinel she would never perceive again. He watched her move with a lightness she hadn't possessed in weeks. His heart, the one that wasn't supposed to beat, aching with a hollow jagged pain. He was a king of the dark, a master of souls, yet he had been defeated by the very thing he sought to protect. He looked at her one last time, his voice a ghost of a whisper that dissolved into the air before it could reach her ears. It is a cruel irony that I, a creature who cannot die, must now spend eternity buried in the one place more silent than a grave, your forgotten memories. I gave you the word, but the price was my existence in your heart. You walk in the light I bought with my absence, never knowing that your every beat is a debt I paid in blood and silence. Sleep well, my little doctor. You have your future, and I have the bitter taste of a name you will never speak again.